Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Bros podcast. My name is Jeremy, and welcome if it's your first time joining us on the show. I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Ilan. How are we?
Pretty good, my friend. The vitamin D dosages are coming through. It's hot, it's warm, it's beautiful. I can't be happier for the weather.
It's what we love, man. I mean, just waking up with a bit of sunshine, it's like you already start your day off with more serotonin and happiness than what you normally would. So it's fucking great. We're loving it. It's just a bit of taste of what's more to come, isn't it? But today, let's dive into the episode. And what we're talking about is feeling of guilt and feeling of guilt when it is necessary and when it's unnecessary, when you actually shouldn't feel guilty for standing up for yourself, and the times when, feeling guilty actually might be warranted.
So as an example, Jeremy, when you were 4 years old and you wanted to take the cookie from the cookie jar before a big dinner and you took that cookie and you got in trouble, maybe you felt a sense of guilt. Maybe it was a form of healthy guilt, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever have that? Did you ever steal cookies from the cookie jar?
You know what? Well, in my household, my mum was always very encouraging of eating cookies and eating snacks and baked goods. So me personally, would be all for it. But there'd be many other examples where guilt would creep in for me as well. And I think more recently, I've spoken about this lots in recent episodes. One I'm getting better in is that those people-pleasing tendencies, that's something where I can resonate in terms of feeling guilt maybe when I shouldn't feel guilty, like when it's standing up for what I truly want to do, but I'm worried or concerned about the response it may give. That's where I've felt a sense of guilt. It's really only, I would say, the past couple months where it's not like a I don't give a fuck attitude, but it's more like I'm going to back myself and at times be a little bit selfish for my own benefit.
That's awesome to hear, because the thing is, guilt's a very useful emotion to have. If we've done something wrong and we feel a sense of guilt, it's because we've broken some sense of an internal rule. So if we value things like respect, loyalty, trust, and we do something that disobeys those internal rules that we have, it's only natural that we're going to feel a sense of guilt. So it's good that that emotion is there. But if we start to feel guilty during times where we want to stand up for ourselves or we want to assert ourselves or put ourselves in a situation where, we're standing up for what we believe in and we still feel a sense of guilt, perhaps because it might engender a negative response from someone else, that's probably a bit less appropriate and less beneficial to feel guilty in those times, because it's probably going to hold you back. And as you said, if you've got people-pleasing tendencies, it's probably going to encourage you to keep conforming to those people-pleasing tendencies. But the reason we feel a sense of guilt is because the true origin behind it is because we all have a set of right and wrong. We have our own set of rules. Some rules, as I said, are going to be adaptive. So they could be things like, I'm a disciplined person, so I'm going to go to gym. So if we don't go to gym, we might feel,
guilty that we
didn't
go.
A bit guilty, right?
Yeah.
Or if we value trust and we spread a secret that one of our friends have told us, we might feel a sense of guilt. Perhaps we have other internal sense of rules, and they might be a little bit more subconscious, and they might permeate in things like, for example, you might have an internal rule that I don't want to disappoint anyone else and I don't want to upset anyone else. So that demand that I place on myself might permeate itself with regards to the behaviors that I do. So that might be very much people-pleasing tendencies, because someone who's a people pleaser won't want to disappoint anyone else. They will not want to ruffle any feathers. So understanding what rules you have that might be, engendering this sense of guilt is a very good start.
I think it can also be used as a motivator to an extent as well. I mean, using that example of gymming, you're a very disciplined person. You want to be hitting in your sessions, getting them in, and you miss out and you naturally feel a sense of guilt. That can be a nice motivator at times if you look at it at a healthy or with a healthy lens and perspective, because it can make you not miss it 2 days in a row. You felt that sense of guilt on that one day. So, I don't want to feel that way the next day. So I better fucking get there tomorrow or else I'm going to feel even worse about myself. So I feel like having that sense of guilt can hold you accountable to your habits, especially if you're in the process of really trying to work towards something. I mean, we're in the summer months now. A lot of us might have the goal of wanting to shed a little bit of fluff off and, feel a little bit fitter about ourselves. And if you've set those goals for yourself to maybe hit 2 runs a week and 2 gym sessions a week, and you've gotten to the end of the week and you haven't done that, that can be a healthy sense of guilt to make sure that you don't do that again going into the next week. And we know that, and I know this from experience as well. Like if I've gotten into the habit of not completing the goals that I've set out to achieve, just like going to the gym, missing a few sessions in a row, that adds up. But it also adds up to the extent where you might just throw it away altogether and then feel even worse about yourself. And that's where that sense of failure can creep in. And that is a sense of unhealthy guilt, I think, because that's a sense of feeling like you've kind of doomed yourself in a way, and you have put yourself down a massive hole into the ground, and it's going to be even harder to creep yourself back up and climb up that ladder again versus, taking one step down that ladder and, only being one step back to the top where you might have been originally. So use it as a motivator to an extent. That's at least, I think, the mentality that I would like to employ for something like this.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful example of where guilt is necessary, because it's actually helping you actualize your long-term goals. It's helping you actualize the best version of who you believe you are capable of becoming. Where it might be a bit counterintuitive is, as an example, is let's say you've got a friend and they consistently take advantage of you, or perhaps they're consistently asking you for money, for you to lend them money, but they never pay it back. And maybe they're in a really dire financial position and you want to keep lending them money. And one day you decide, you know what, I got to take care of me first. I can't keep lending this friend money. I need to, set a healthy boundary and let them know that this is no longer appropriate.
And it happens as well. Like, sorry to interject, but with, past relationships, like, you've maybe broken up with someone and one partner still might be demanding money for certain things. And yeah, you might have that sense of guilt of, I did love this person. I still might care for them in a certain way. So if they're asking, I'm going to keep providing, but because it's stemming from that sense of guilt, right?
Correct. So if you feel guilty for standing up for yourself in this situation, because, if you really take a step back and you ask yourself, why do I feel guilty about telling my friend, no, I don't want to give you money? Perhaps you might come up with responses like, well, they're going to be in a really shit financial position. And
or mentally they're going to be even worse and you'd feel bad about
correct.
that.
And they're going to hate me. They're not going to want to, they're going to be, they're not going to be able to rely upon themselves. They're going to be struggling so much that by me not giving them that money, they're fucked. And that feeling is going to make you feel insanely guilty, even though in your heart of hearts, you're doing the right thing. So let me ask you, why do you think, if we know that we're doing the right thing, why do we still have that sense of guilt? Because a lot of people will have it.
With this example, I think there's a sense of fear. I think there's a large amount of fear attached to it. Using that example of friend or ex-partner asking you for money to pay for certain things, let's just say for their welfare, for example, or for food if they're struggling financially, you feel guilty because you are fearful of what that person might do to themselves or the place that they might find themselves in if you don't accommodate that request. So it's stemming from a sense of fear. So it starts off as guilt, but the guilt is what's felt on the surface as that outer emotion. That maybe guilt is that conscious emotion that you're feeling, but the subconscious emotion is fear. It's stemming from fear. That's the root cause of it.
I reckon it's the other way around. I think the fear is the more peripheral, the more surface level, but the guilt's underneath.
Okay.
Because I reckon, and here's my theory, a bit of bro theory going at it. I reckon there's an element of it that you've broken your own internal maladaptive rule. So maybe your maladaptive rule is like you believe in self-sacrifice for some reason. Maybe you believe that you need to always show up for your friends, even at your own personal cost. And that might be a rule you don't necessarily agree with, but it's a rule that you've naturally and adaptively, well, maladaptively at this point, developed when you were younger for a myriad of reasons. And by virtue of you breaking that internal rule that you've got, you're now going to start to feel a sense of guilt. And that's not, again, and I want to emphasize this point. This rule that you may have created, it wasn't a conscious thing. It was a subconscious thing. And we tend to develop rules and value judgments from a young age based on how we interact with the world around us, with the parents, with our friends. Perhaps you were bullied when you were younger. Perhaps you grew up in an unstable family situation where anytime you did communicate your needs, you were shunned. Maybe it was reinforced that for you to even be loved or have affection, you needed to do some form of self-sacrifice, right? Maybe that was your only form of getting friends, was maybe just being the emotional punching bag. So perhaps nowadays, when you're in that position where you're doing a self-sacrificial role and you know it's not good for you, maybe that's why you feel that sense of guilt, because you're going against a rule that's been so long deeply held within you.
It takes a while for that to also, for you to snap out of those behaviors. Another example that comes to mind is, let's just say you're a health practitioner. That's an example that, me and you are in, health practitioners, or you own a shop, right? And let's just say any service, you're in charge of any service, you're providing a service to people, and you have found yourself maybe giving discounts to certain people, right? You give regular discounts to maybe certain people that come into your store or come in for your services, whether they're friends, whether they're people that maybe struggle to afford it. And over time, that's added up, and that becomes the behavior. The behavior is that person is now always expecting that discount. But times might get tough for you, and you might not be able to afford to offer that discount anymore. Or because you've offered that discount to one person, you feel the need to offer that discount to another person, to another family member, to whoever it is that might fall in the same category as that original person. So what you've done there is, one, you've established the behavior that person is now always going to expect from you. And as a result of always expecting that from you, you now will struggle to change that behavior when change will need to occur or might need to occur one day, because of guilt, because of going against what is the norm for your relationship with that person. Let's just say your prices rise in the shop where you're paying rent for, and you need to afford to put your prices up, but you feel guilty asking for more money from that person because you've always charged them at that discounted rate. So prime example of feeling guilty, and where feeling guilty can actually have a lot of long-term reparations and disadvantages on you. And that's a really tough thing to snap out of when it gets that point of becoming long-term consistency, that snowball effect of always giving and giving and giving, to the point where maybe you can't give anymore, or you can't afford to do that anymore. It causes that disadvantageous effect on you now. But I think if we can also snap out of that, and whilst it might take balls to snap out of that and to voice up and say, you know what, I actually can't afford to do this with you anymore. I know we might have had this agreement for a long period of time, but this is the situation I'm in and I cannot afford to do that. That's a really hard conversation to have with a person. But if you can have that conversation, I truly believe that whilst they might disagree or feel frustrated at the way your actions and relationships might be, like let's just use that money example, they might have to pay more. I do think they will have more respect for you for voicing that concern and changing that behavior that needs to occur for you. I think it ultimately shows that you're valuing yourself higher than maybe what you have been doing in the past. And I think having that value and showing people that you value your service at that high level people will therefore see you as that valuable type figure and will have more respect for you.
And you know what I love about your point there? We've got the agency to change if we want to change. That's the exciting thing about
We're
it.
We're just scared to do it.
We're scared to do it. And there's a bit of that sunk cost as well. Like imagine if you've been charging this person the same price for years. You've built up that customer loyalty, right? You've got such a great relationship, but it's at a personal cost. You need to increase prices. You know that, wages, inflation's going up. You need to do something about it. You need to still, feed your family. You need to make sure that you can put money on the table. You've got a bunch of things you need to take care of first. You need to take care of yourself. But a part of it is also like, how is this going to conflict with my relationships with others? And where the sunk cost comes into it is because it's insanely hard to undo what has already been done. You're trying to untangle a pattern of behaviors that have probably been entrenched from a very, very young age. We know that personality tends to stay consistent over time. It's one of the biggest things. Like, if you're someone who is a fairly confident person, chances are you're not going to become someone who's not confident. Like, you might, wax and wane a little bit, but it's very hard to change behaviors. But you can figure out why you're feeling guilty in that moment. And it starts with actually asking yourself, what rule am I breaking that's maladaptive for me? And B, is this a rule I actually want to live with? Is it benefiting me? Is it benefiting me knowing the fact that I'm maintaining this great relationship at the cost of people pleasing, but also at the cost of bloody not being able to supply enough money and, put food on my own table? So it's understanding and recognizing which rules are you willing to live with, because at a certain point you do got to put yourself first, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess these are monetary examples, but if we don't use monetary and service examples, we can use just relationship examples.
Let's do it.
And that means, like, say you've been in a relationship with a person, you see each other 3-4 times a week, but you've now started a full-time job, shit's getting hectic, you still need to make time for the gym as well, and you need to, now you might only be able to accommodate seeing that person twice a week, when in the past 2 years you've been seeing them 3 to 4 times a week. It's the exact same example, but you feel that sense of guilt of now needing to ask to strip it back a little bit to make things work for you in your life as well. Tough conversation to have, but to what extent are you willing to continue giving and showing up and doing things that you were doing, because it might reach the point where it eventually boils over and it explodes and gets even worse. So it's a tough conversation to have, but how hard is that conversation to really have if it means saving that relationship further down the line, or saving from you guys reaching that boiling point? And I think a lot of people are scared to have that conversation, whether it is just a friendship or a relationship or a service. They're scared because it's fear of disappointing that person. And that's where we talk about, that tango between guilt and fear and whether it's warranted.
Can we stay with that example for a second? I think that's a very relatable thing for most people in their 20s who are, in a relationship that hasn't gotten too serious yet. I think it's a very fascinating conversation, because in a lot of ways, if you're wanting to see the partner less, it's not because you want to necessarily see them less. It's a matter of you genuinely have to in order to accommodate all the other aspects of your lifestyle. So you don't feel guilty about having this need. You know that it's necessary. You know yourself quite well in that respect. But what you feel guilty about isn't you bringing it up, but it's going to be the person's reaction. What are you scared of in that moment? Are you scared that they're going to, create a massive conflict with you and they're not going to respect those needs? Because look, for them, they might, fair game if they say to you, look, I'd rather see you more and I place more of a value judgment on this relationship. That's not to say you don't, but I just understand that you can't meet me where I'm at. And they might want to end the relationship, or they might not want to compromise.
So that's what people are scared of, yeah? They're scared
I think ultimately,
is she going to walk away from me?
Ultimately, I think there's that. It's also having that uncomfortable conversation. But I think, no one respects someone more than someone who's actually willing to be authentic. Say what you mean what you say. And if you apply that in that conversation where you say, look, I want to see you, but I genuinely don't have the capacity in this time. It's not like you're not a priority to me. You are. That's why I want to see you as much as I do. But I just know that if I maintain the status quo that we are now, something's going to give. And it might be my physical health. And I don't want my physical health to, wane. Because at the end of the day, no matter if we're in a healthy relationship or not, you still should be putting yourself as number one person, because you want to bring the best version of yourself. So if you're in a situation where you start neglecting things that are quite important to you, that could be, it doesn't even have to be gym, but it could be your sense of mental health, your sense of social supports, seeing your friends who are a major source of your fulfillment. If you start down-regulating one of those things that make you the best version of yourself, how can you expect the other partner to expect you to bring your own most ideal version to them? And I think if you communicate that, it goes a long way.
So how do we snap out of that feeling of guilt then? Say it is a person that is scared of voicing these things to a friend, to a partner, because they're scared of the reaction. They're scared of the fear of them being disappointed, of them walking away. how can a person overcome that sense of guilt? What do you reckon?
There's no quick fix, because if you're feeling guilty about these sort of situations, chances are you're feeling guilty about a whole corpus of other situations where you might have to, potentially disappoint someone. So chances are you might have a rule there, which is I can't disappoint others because of X and Y and Z. So it's up to you to actually kind of start investigating why you have this maladaptive rule. Why is it that you can't be honest with those that you love? Maybe you do have a fear of abandonment for whatever reason. We know that, how we view the world is shaped in our early years. So potentially in your earliest caregiver moments, or potentially when you were younger, you had an experience that shaped these sort of behaviors such that you don't want to have hard conversations with someone. It may have not even happened when you were a baby or a toddler or a child, maybe when you were an adolescent, but maybe you had such a shitty experience to the point where it's now fractured your ability to have hard conversations because you have a rule that says, I can't disappoint anyone else. And then the simple, it's simple, not easy is the main thing here. Ask yourself, is this a rule that you want to live with, or can you part with it? Can you get rid of it? Is it a rule that's benefiting you? Because once we understand that guilt only arises from feeling as though that we've broken an internal rule, then we can move forward. But you need to have that awareness first. And then I think it's naturally starting to expose yourself to that situation. It's, there's no other way than through. And by through, I mean it's having that conversation with that partner and saying, like, look, I feel guilty saying this, but here's the reality. I want to see you, but I can't because of X, Y, and Z. But assuming you communicate it in a loving and respectful way that still asserts your own needs whilst having respect for the other person, they have no other choice. Like, at the end of the day, you have to stand up for yourself at some point. So I think the more you do it, especially when you're younger, the better you will be. You will start to feel less and less guilt, because you'll realize that the people who are meant for you aren't going to really abandon you. They're going to be the ones that stay around even when you assert yourself.
So I like that. So just to summarize, you find the way out by one, asking the question, why do I feel this sense of guilt? Why do I feel this sense of fear? Question number 2, can I live with this sense of reason as to why I feel this way?
Yeah, this internal rule I've placed upon myself.
Yeah, is that something that I'm willing to continue with, or am I not willing to continue with? And then number 3, exposure therapy. So actually exposing yourself to it, which could be, I guess, the litmus test to see whether, your hypothesis will work or whether it won't work.
And you know what? Let's catastrophize in a healthy way, if that even exists. What if they do leave you? Right? Like, is that not just like a affirmation for you that they're just not the right partner for you? And obviously that's not something you want to kind of contend with when you've got a lot of stressful stuff on. Like, who needs a breakup when you're going through a lot of stress and you're moving, there's a bit of a transition in your life. But really, like, do you really want to be with someone who wouldn't want to be able to meet you at least halfway or compromise? Because if you're willing to do it, you'd hope that they would as well.
Exactly.
But at the same time, think about the positive. It's like, wow, you can have this conversation. Your partner might be like, you know what, I'm going to miss you. But fair enough, we'll FaceTime more, we'll chat more, we'll be more intentional about the date nights, and maybe you come out with a sense of relief, and maybe it starts to undo that trauma wound that you may have had when you were younger, which is when you are authentic with someone, they don't abandon you. And boy, wouldn't that be a pretty cool exposure test, knowing that everything that you once believed is now falsified because what you thought was going to happen didn't.
It reminds me of something I heard this week from Mel Robbins, and Mel Robbins was talking. She recorded an episode with her husband, and it was about their marriage and about, what makes their marriage so fulfilling. And she used the analogy about, being on a ship. So look at a relationship as, being on the ship with that person. And you might be going through waves, you might be going through treacherous conditions, but, are you prepared to be on that ship together and get through it? Or is one of you just going to jump off the ship and chuck on your life vest and say au revoir? Like, are you prepared to both be on that ship and work through things together? And prime example here, which, brought this whole analogy to my mind, is that, if it's a simple thing like a compromise you have to make, like a need or a boundary that you need to voice to a partner, to a friend, to a person that you're serving in a shop, if that person is unwilling to make that compromise or to see that perspective or to allow growth to come from you guys going through what may be seen as a challenge, then then that is very telling. That is very telling for your relationship, for your friendship, for your connection with that person. So see it as an opportunity, I think, to either grow with that person. And if it's not an opportunity to grow with that person, if they're willing to walk away from it entirely, well, it's an opportunity to experience self-growth nevertheless.
100%. And it doesn't just apply in relationships as well. It also applies in, for any middle child out there who feels as though they're being burdened with the familial responsibilities. They're always the one who has to take care of the familial burdens, and everything is kind of handballed to them. And they have a major difficulty in standing up for themselves because of this. You can apply the same metric here. Perhaps if you stand up for yourself, your parents aren't going to, hopefully not, abandon you by you asserting your own needs, right? Maybe they're telling you you're the one who's always responsible for doing the dishes at home or doing some of the family admin stuff. But you say like, nah, look, next week I've got a busy weekend. I need to attend to this. And maybe you're not used to saying that. But what happens if you do assert yourself then? Maybe you will feel a sense of guilt, but it's the same logic as before. What rule are you holding on to that isn't serving you?
I like it, mate. On that note, lots to think about here.
Yeah, man.
Lots to think about. And I think to summarize in terms of ending off this episode, like you just said, if you are someone that typically feels guilt and guilt stemming from fear, ask yourself that really simple question of why you feel that way first, and go through why you feel that way. Be really reflective about it, and then ask yourself, is this something I'm willing to endure, to put up with? And then if the answer is still yes, put it to the test. Put it to the test and see. And that way you either find out whether you're right, whether you're wrong, and what more self-growth could you do from there. I think that is the ultimate form of self-growth and challenge you can pose on yourself. So whilst it might be tough, nothing worth having is easy and comes easy. So why not do it and save yourself from things boiling over later?
I agree. Amen, ahoy, and goodbye.
See you later.